guys, happy GA Flashback Friday, TGIF. Thank God it's Friday. That is all I can say about this week from hell. Okay? As you guys know, my phone got stolen on Tuesday, which meant that there was no video on Wednesday, which meant that I did a video yesterday when I got my temporary phone because my phone won't be here till Monday. I quit. I just quit. I quit. And then, not to mention, now I have to help my mother with this rummage sale that is taking place at my house. So my garage is in complete, disarray. It's driving me absolutely nuts. I just need a good drink. Preferably alcoholic. Like yesterday. Shut up. But anyway, we are not here to talk about my week from hell. We are here for GA Flashback Friday, where we recap one of our past favorite episodes of Ghost Adventures, and today is no exception to that rule because we are talking about one of my favorite episodes of Ghost Adventures, Eastern State Penitentiary. I absolutely love this episode for a multitude of reasons that we are going to cover today. But as always, I want to give you a little bit of history into Eastern State Penn before we get into Lockdown Breakdown, KK. Now, Eastern State Penitentiary was built in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania in 1829 and housed over 75,000 inmates in its history. Holy kitty cow. That's a lot of people. That's a lot of delinquents. Now, the thing about Eastern State Penitentiary at the beginning of when it was built was it was all solitary confinement. In most prisons, you have an area of the prison that's solitary confinement. It's made up of 6 or 7 cells, and you are completely locked down. No, the whole freaking prison was like this. Every single cell was solitary confinement. So you would get in your cell, there was no windows, there was nothing to look out of, it was just stone walls, and you had a metal door, and then you had a wooden door that would close so you really couldn't see out. And that prevented you guys from talking back and forth across the hall to other inmates. And they would go so far as to putting bags over their heads with just eye holes and a place for them to breathe so that they couldn't talk to other inmates while they were being transferred in the cells. Seriously? Okay. And the reason that they did the solitary confinement was that was an idea that was concocted at a meeting held at Ben Franklin's house. Cool, right? By the Quakers, who believed that if you put them in solitary confinement, it would rehabilitate them and they would find God. No, all it did was drove them nuts. It drove them crazy, and then they killed themselves, and then they killed other people, and then they were just worse off than they were when they got there. It was absolutely insane. I can't stand being in a confined place for very long at a time. I could not imagine being in solitary confinement. It would absolutely drive me nuts. Now, it being an old, creepy, insanely haunted prison, of course there is tons of death that goes within this building. And prisoners in this building died from everything imaginable. Sickness, murder, suicide, masturbation, apparently. Yeah, I know. Hold the phone, right? You heard me right. There is a death ledger at Eastern State Penitentiary. And in said death ledger is the name, the age, and the cause of death for every inmate up until the 1930s that died in the prison. It says that someone died from masturbation. WTF? Now we're all grown adults here. I have never in my life, in my 28 and a half years on this planet, have I ever heard of someone dying from masturbation. That is a brain tickler. That's a new one on me. I really want to... Wow. I'm speechless. I'm never speechless. That one rendered me speechless, and it made me giggle. Zach was just blown away. He was like, masturbation? What? And that was kind of my thought, too. I can understand, suicide, you slit your wrist, you slit your throat, you hang yourself. I want to know what went on in that cell for him to die of masturbation. No, you know what? I really don't. I don't want to know what he was thinking about. Like, did he stroke out? Like, I don't understand. Wow, okay. But anyway, moving on. I could do a whole video on that, but I'm done. I'm done. After this week, I can't even begin to fathom that. So moving on. But yes, according to the Eastern State Penitentiary Death Ledger, you could have died from masturbation if you were an inmate there. Moving on from that mess. Now, in 1913, they abandoned the solitary confinement. They kind of revamped the prison a little bit, which caused the population to swell to over 1,700 inmates at a time because they now allowed 2 inmates to be in the cell together. Now, there were some notorious inmates in Eastern State Penitentiary, the most notorious being Al Capone. He was sentenced to 8 months in Eastern State Penitentiary for concealing a weapon. And he had a cell that was something else. Being who he was, of course, he got what he wanted. And he had the cushy life, even in prison. So he had a really nice bed, he had a desk, a radio, he had all of this stuff. And apparently he had a ghost as well. He was convinced and swore up and down that he was being haunted by Jimmy Clark, who was a victim of the St. Valentine's Day Massacre, where 7 people were gunned down in the prison on Valentine's Day. And he was convinced that he was being haunted by him. The guards would hear Al Capone screaming, "No, get out," like screaming like a little girl. This big, tough gangster was screaming like a little girl over a ghost. Fail at life. And so it goes to show you that even though you're in prison, you can still be haunted by other people. So it also shows you the paranormal history and how far it goes back, because I mean, this was, in the early 1900s, and here he's being, haunted by somebody who had passed away before then. So that's pretty much the history of Eastern State Pen. Now, going into lockdown breakdown, there was a lot that went on in this lockdown. And so I'm going to break it down by location like I've done in the past. They began their lockdown in cell block 12, where there were these, like, the gates, the railings, the catwalks were really close to the center, and guards would constantly get pushed off because the inmates would stick their hands through the cells, and they would push them back. And they finally installed, like, these metal bars to catch them because it was just happening so frequently, and so many guards were dying from falling off of this thing. And so they get in there, and at first there's not really a lot going on. And then they end up getting like this tapping sound from inside of a cell, followed by cold chills, and then it kind of all just spirals out of control. They get an EMF spike in one of the cells that they kind of lock themselves in. And then they get this EVP that was so chilling. This EVP was like, "I know God. I know God." And it is just insanely, like, creepy because, like I said, back when there was solitary confinement, the Quakers believed that this was a place for them to find God. And so that's why there was skylights built in the prison so that they could, amend their sins to God and things like that. It was just insanely creepy. They also get a couple of other disembodied voices that you can actually hear on camera audio, and one says hungry, which is not surprising because they would go days without food. And then there was one that just said hi, and that was actually captured after they left the cell, and it was captured on the static night vision camera. Now, moving on, they go, like, they're walking through, and they end up hearing all these other noises, and they end up pinpointing the noise to this one room that they'd been looking for like an hour, where it housed the mad chair. The mad chair was one of the torturous punishments that they would use. So after they moved from the solitary confinement to more of a standardized prison system where you had 2 cells and you were not in confinement all the time, they just resorted to torture. They would sit you outside in the winter and hose you down with ice cold water and let you sit there and freeze. They would put you in this chair where they would leave you for days and days and days, like strapped in to the point where your circulation was almost completely cut off. And they found this chair. So Zach, being Zach, of course, gets in the chair. and is taunting them and talking to them. And they get an EVP that basically says, obviously, get out. Now, they also get outside of that outside of that cell. Nick is hearing like a jail cell door open, and he's hearing clawing, almost like the spirits are trying to claw their way out of their jail cell. It was, ugh. Now, they are moving on, and they're trying to get to another area of the prison where they're going to kind of all split up. And while they're there, while they're moving along, they start capturing pictures with their like standard light camera and like their infrared camera. So they're taking pictures, and of course they can't see the flashes to the naked eye, but we can see them in night vision. They took 289 still infrared photos, and out of those 289, one of them had something incredible on it. Like in the bottom left hand corner of the photo, there is a doorway, and it's really brightly lit, like almost like emitting light and this kind of smoky haze. And the guys did not see that with their naked, there was no lights, there was nothing that could explain that. And it almost looks like it was a doorway to like the other side. It was creepy. Straight up out of like Poltergeist creepy. Like this white door pulling you into the light. It was insanely, insanely creepy. Probably one of the best pieces of evidence they got from this episode. Now they go to split up, and they decide to send Aaron to the infirmary on his own, because Aaron is such good bait, and the infirmary is known to be insanely freaking active. So they send Aaron to the infirmary, where he is basically freaking out the entire time he's in there. He's like, this being alone stuff is bull. Like, you want to know, he wants to say it's bullshit, but he doesn't. He's like, this is crap. And he's freaking out. So he's hearing all these, he basically just hears footsteps and banging noises. But for Aaron, at this point in his Ghost Adventures crew career, was enough for him. Like, he was wigging out. Nick was out in the solitary yard where a inmate was housed and ended up beating a guard to death, like beating his brains out and then just going back in his cell and taking a nap because, that's hot. And so he was out there, and he gets a disembodied voice that says, conveniently, Nick. Don't you love that? I know they just love when their names get called out. And he also captures on the camera after he leaves the area a man shouting, and it actually drains or screaming, and it drains the infrared light batteries that is like illuminating the doorway. And so they believe, of course, that the spirit used the energy from those batteries to emit his scream. And Zach, of course, goes to Al Capone's cell and sits there to taunt him. He's like, I'm taunting Al Capone. Really? Like, this is my life. And he doesn't really get a lot. He gets a couple of taps. He gets a couple of, little bangs. And he's like, is that all you got? This big, tough man's going to make me scream like a girl? That's not going to make me scream like a girl. I'm going to sit right here. And so he does. And he taunts some more. And he doesn't really get anything. But after he leaves, the static night vision camera captures a disembodied voice of like a man shouting, which we can only assume is Al Capone freaking out over his ghost. So that is pretty much all I have for Lockdown Breakdown. Overall, Eastern State Penitentiary is insanely freaking haunted. It is old. It is creepy. It is what paranormal investigators live for, and I give it like a good 9 out of 10. Maybe even a 9.5 on the freak out scale. It's just creepy. Like, it doesn't have to do anything. Just looking at it and the energy around it is creepy. I think a lot of the haunting there is residual. I think there are a few intelligent spirits, but I think for the most part, a lot of them are residual activity. There was so much day-to-day scheduling that went on through a prison that just goes with prison life that I think a lot of the haunting is residual, although I do fully believe that there are some intelligent spirits there. So that is all I have for GA Flashback Friday. I will be back on Tuesday for GAQA Tuesday, where I answer all of your Ghost Adventures related questions that you guys asked me all up on the Facebook page. So I hope you guys have a fantastic, wonderful rest of your weekend. I know I'm going to be insanely freaking busy, but it's good. It's all good. It's all good. So until Tuesday, stay happy, stay healthy, enjoy the spring and summer-like weather. Much love and happiness.